That's this kid here, and they're going to be eating the Russian sleep experiment. But I say, look, my kitty's here to join us. Yeah. Today we're going to be reading the Russian sleep experiment. Now, this story is highly disturbing. Very disturbing, actually. And so therefore, I do warn you, for kids 7 and under, that this may or may not give you, that this probably will give you nightmares, since it's not really a story for little kids. So, when I read this, we're going to see how he likes it. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental-based gas supplement. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows in the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water, toilets, and enough food and enough dry food to last all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and didn't sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, but it was only noticed that they continued to talk about dramatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations had a darker aspect after the 4th day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about their conditions and the environment that led one of them that led them to start develop extreme that led them to where they started to develop extreme paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began whispering to the microphones and one-way mirror portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the researchers by turning over their comrades. The other subjects in captivity with them, at first the researchers suspected it was the effect of the gas. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming and ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but he was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers thought that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising about this was the behavior of the other captives, the other captives to react to this, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them over the glass portholes. The screaming apparently stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. 3 more days passed. Researchers checked on the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since I thought it possible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must be alive. In fact, the amount of oxygen of 5 people would consume at very heavy levels of extreme exercise. One morning on the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get the reaction of the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke a response from the captives. They were afraid that that they were either dead or worse. They announced, "You're opening the chamber to test the microphone. Step away from the door and lay flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase and a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and military forces funding the research. Able to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open up the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the supplement gas and filled with fresh air. Immediately, the voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for their life or loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was open. The soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could really call that state of any of them alive. The food rations for the past 5 days had not been so much as touched. They were chunks of meat from the dead test subject, stuffed into the drain into the center of the chamber, blocking the drain from allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. No one knows how much of the water on the floor was actually blood. It was never determined. All 4 of the surviving test subjects had also had large proportions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The flesh and exposed bone on the fingertips included that the wounds were self-inflicted by hand, not by teeth, and the researchers immediately thought. Closer examination of the wounds and angles of the wounds indicated that most of them were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all 4 subjects had been removed. While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place, the skin and most of the muscle attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the rib cage, and the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had been taken out and laid on the floor around the still surviving bodies of the test subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of 5 days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the faculty, but still many of them refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and begging and demanding that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out, another gravely injured from having his testicles ripped off, and an artery severed in his leg by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 soldiers lost their lives, if you count the ones who committed suicide in the following weeks in the incident. In the struggle, 4 surviving test subjects had been one of the 4 surviving test subjects had ruptured his spleen, and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injured with more than 10. He was injected with more than 10 times the human amount of morphine, and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the rib cages and arms of one of the doctors. When his heart had seemed to beat for a full 2 minutes after he bled out, and the point was out on the point there was more air in his bloodstream system. Even after his heart stopped, he continued to scream and fail to for a full another 3 minutes, struggling to attack any more researchers, but he just kept repeating the word more, over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to the medical facility. The 2 with the intact vocal cords continued begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room in the factory, as the faculty had. The process of preparing the subject that has to have his organs placed back in within his body, it was found that he was extremely immune to the sedative they had given them to prepare him for surgery. He fought fiercely against the researchers when the anesthetic gas was brought to put him under. He managed to tear off a 4-inch leather strap on his wrist, even through the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding his wrists as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heartbeat stopped. In the autopsy test, the test subject died on the operation table. It was found that the body had the triple amount of the level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had 9 broken bones and struggled to not be subdued. Most of them were torn. Most of them were on his face. Most of the broken bones were on his face, and his muscles had been ruptured in many ways. The second survivor had been the first of the group of the 5 that started screaming. His vocal cords destroyed. He was unable to beg for or object to surgery. He and the other cat. He only could react by shaking his head violently in denial when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react to the for the extreme 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with the remains of his skin. The surgeon standing next to it, the surgeon reported that it should be impossible for a patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse, assuming the surgery started, she had the patient's mouth curled into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this might be something of important. The surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. The other two